Okay, take like, I don't know, 5,000. Welcome. My name is Michelle. This is Pilates with Michelle. However, I am working into my podcast world. I'm trying to find my way in here. This is only my third one that I've recorded. And my dog is now realizing that I'm talking, and so she is here with a ball, thinking that she's going to get all of the throws, because this is what happened when COVID hit. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. So COVID hit, and she was like 6 months old, and so I'd get on the phone and I'd go outside and I would throw this lovely ball for her the whole time I'd be talking. And so she figured out that basically when I was talking and it was in a one-dimensional, she can figure it out. If it's two people, if she can hear you, anyways, if she hears me talking to what she is deemed to be no one, that means that I'm supposed to be outside. Except it's raining here. And so we also haven't been for our spin yet. So yeah, it's been super just chill here this morning, and I'm gonna get through this so that we can hit stop and I can load it up. So here we go. My name is Michelle. Welcome. And I have titled my little podcasts here. I've got a couple of them, but I've gone through when I used to be on Facebook and we would hop on to during that COVID world where everybody went home. I basically went in and started these kind of little spiels about That's the Tea. Thought it was super funny. My girls were the ones that gave it the terminology, the title, because I guess it's when you're spilling the beans, kind of say you're looking at the tea, you're looking at all the things. So that's one. And then add the sauce is what I actually added into the title here. And I add that because when I teach in a way that, especially depending on I do it for every class. It doesn't matter what kind of level you're at, but throughout the class, I'll give them options. And I'll say, if this is something that you would like to add, if you want to add the sauce, let's go for it. This is your sauce you're going to be able to pick up. But just like at any restaurant, at any table, the sauce is always optional. It's never required. So whenever I'm layering anything, I always give them those options. And so add the sauce is basically the title of this, because really, truly, as I'm giving out information and you're taking it in and you're learning and I'm learning while we go along, yeah, it's add the sauce. So add the layers, works for you. Take what works best and then move along, because you know what the best thing about, especially in the Pilates world, there's nothing like it. Well, there are other things like it, but it's really, really, really fascinating how in the Pilates world, it's so imperative to get to other instructors, to get yourself into other classes and with other people. Even as an instructor, get yourself around so that you're seeing, like, the kitty cat is now playing with the pumpkin. Now she's moving my screen around. Okay, you ready? That'll take her. Anyways, okay, so all of that being said, when you learn from different mentors and you take different continuing education credit classes, workshops, taking from different people, you're going to hear things and they're going to say things in a way that is like a light bulb moment for you. You're going to suddenly realize, oh, that's what they've been trying to tell me. So please take advantage of all the different workshops, the different podcasts that are out there, and try not to eliminate outside of Pilates world, because there's a lot that you can garner if you're a new instructor. There's a lot you can garner from outside world, learning kettlebell, learning any kind of workshop that'll take you into that teaching fitness world. Well, I can't say any because, well, yeah, some of them. Yikes. Okay. Get in. Obviously, check out the credentials of the person that you're learning from. That would be a good start. But anyways, so I was watching and listening to someone this past week, and there's a whole thing going on in the Pilates world right now. There's a lawsuit because the Pilates world doesn't need any more turmoil. Anyways, I digress. But there is a lawsuit happening, and in that lawsuit, it is in regards to picture copyrights of Mr. Joseph Pilates. So I am not going to actually get into that lawsuit at this point. However, that lawsuit took me to a podcast that I wanted to listen to about a gal who has been teaching and has taught through the other lawsuit that was happening. And when that first lawsuit was happening, that was when I actually started my Pilates journey, was back in that point. In fact, my very first Pilates certification was called Mat Science because they couldn't call it Pilates because Pilates was in this lawsuit at the time. So I've kind of been through Pilates in that I wasn't an active, comprehensive teacher at the time. So I only took bits and pieces of it. And then as a military wife, we then moved and I found my way in and out of Pilates through the years. But anyways, I digress. However, she mentioned something in that podcast, and it's called The Pilates Goddess. The podcast is and the teacher that was talking, Linda. I think. Anyways, she and I'll link it here in the notes. She mentioned that really at that point, at the lawsuit, the first lawsuit, she said there was a definite, before that, she said Pilates instructors tended to own kind of where they were, recognizing kind of their mentor line and how they were taught, okay? And everybody respected everybody and recognized that the method of the movement, of the methodology, the principles of it, that it kind of came across in whichever format basically that you were teaching, okay? Now, she said after that lawsuit, it became very, very, very split. That was when the beginning of that split happened. Contemporary, classical, contemporary. And you were one or the other kind of instructor. You were either a classical instructor or you were a contemporary instructor, but you weren't both. So it's super fascinating now because I teach in a Club Pilates, and Club Pilates is definitely more contemporary. It's definitely not your classical, a classically based format. Now, you're going to have classical instructors in there. You're going to have classical, and you'll see the majority classical type of exercises or not type, but the classical exercises in Club Pilates. We're not, I always teach a classical line in my classes. However, even the reformer itself is set in more of a contemporary setting. What I mean by that is that your straps, where the straps are set up from, when I went through training, my mentor mentioned that if you look back at a Contrology reformer, a reformer that is set the way Joe would have set his straps were leather, and then his handles were wooden. So the straps are what guided the length, not the handle. So that would be, if you were looking at a double looped handle, that would be your short strap would actually be where the leather loop would have been, and he would have set the reformer to that versus the long loop, which is how they're set currently in our studio, at least. Okay, so, but that conversation then led me into another one that I was reading and talking about and looking into, and that is that honestly, our contemporary instructors that would really call themselves really mainly contemporary, to get to that point, we have to have the basis of the classical. This just is what it is, right? Your training's going to own that classical training, and then you're going to start to see where that contemporary kind of slides out of, right? So in your classical, to understand how to maybe progress into something that's a little maybe not in that classical method, it typically has a background somewhere in that classical, or it may be that it comes that contemporary may come from something that is just a functionality of how we move in our world. Okay. So let's say we're looking at the classical move of snake. How do we make snake more, how do we progress into snake, right? There isn't necessarily a set classical, like I can't look at snake and go, okay, well, I pull this level, this level, this level, this level, this level, and I find my way all the way down into maybe, let's say, a level 1 or maybe a reformer 1 exercise if I'm in balance body, right? And a reformer 1 exercise that I look at and go, okay, well, I'm going to take this exercise in reformer 1, and then I'm going to add it to this exercise in reformer 2, and then I end up with this exercise in reformer 3, and that's snake. Okay, I can look at snake and I can say, okay, you're not in a side plank, but let's say I'm going to take side plank and I'm going to move side plank. So I'm going to put the short box at the end of the reformer. I'm going to go forearm on that box. My feet are going to be into my platform and I'm going to bend and extend, right? I'm not in snake, but I'm in that essence where my feet are on the platform. They're not in snake mode, right? Because that's up and over, right? So I'm in the platform. Then what I may do is in that level class where they've progressed, where that forearm side plank works really, really well for them, what I'll then probably do is give them an option. Let's take that back foot and let's slide that back foot in front of the front foot, right? And layer my feet top on top. Continue moving. Now, that gives me that progression from that side plank to this top on top, and I'm in that foot placement of snake. So that when I come into snake later and I'm adding snake into their progressions, I can say, okay, so foot on and then back foot on top, and it's more, I'm trying to think, okay, so out, up, yep, okay, so so anyways, as I'm on there, I am looking at it going, okay, yes, this makes sense, and I can start layering that up, and then from there I just continue progressing. So we have to be able to take advanced exercises and regress them back, and I hate to use even the word regress because honestly each little piece has its own thing, and I don't know if any of this is making sense. This is when I wish I could actually have a conversation with you rather than me just talking to a window or a film of camera, because the point of this whole conversation is saying classical move, contemporary move, or maybe some people, they get super, super mad at me, but I think your contemporary can't be here without your classical. But your classical also needs some of that contemporary thought process so that you can take the classical and make it work for as many layers of people as possible. Maybe that's because I'm more of a contemporary teacher that I say that. Maybe it's because I don't teach in a solid state, just a private studio, a private classical Pilates studio. Some things to ponder. But I can't let go of the fact that I've had the amount of years of experience in actual gym world that I look at things with a little bit of a different thought process. So I look at things like, I want to teach somebody a snatch, right? So if I want to teach somebody a dumbbell snatch, I don't start straight off the box with snatching. I start them in a squat, right? And everybody needs to squat because we squat all day long. You sit on a chair, you stand up, you squatted, you're welcome, you've done it. You got out of bed, you were sitting on your bed, you stood up, you're welcome. You do an ab curl. I promise you, at one point, as you're getting up off that bed, you're ab curling. You're welcome, right? We do these movements all day long. And so I look at movement and I try to see where that movement is played out and how I progress it forward. How do I take this move over here and make it work for here. So all this kind of started in my head this morning because I actually went over to a friend's house who is there. She's working on her classical, her balanced body comprehensive certification. And she's about to go into her Reformer 3 training in a couple of weeks, or in about 3 weeks. So in that Reformer 3 training, she's looking at snake and she's thinking, oh my word, am I going to be able to do snake? And honestly, snake is only one of the pieces in Reformer 3 that I look at and go, yeah, there's your swan extension on the long box. We have grasshopper on the long box. We have horseback on the long box, and thigh stretch on the Reformer, right? Because it's Reformer 3, so all these are the Reformer base. Well, let's say let's say I don't necessarily understand your swan extension. So hopefully at one point you've done swan maybe on the box with your hands on the foot bar. That's a progression, right? Let's say I can do the chair and now I'm in swan on the chair, which is how I actually started her today, because she took chair, but she hasn't been really finding her way on her chair as much. And in the chair, actually the swan on chair is gorgeous. It's so pretty because that pedal can help you drive yourself into that extension. It can help guide you there, right? So that piece of equipment plays into the Reformer one. But there's no other place that you do swan on that your feet are connected into something. So when I'm on swan, on the long box, on the Reformer, my feet are into the platform. So I have something to press into as I come up. But then that begs the question, what about the Cadillac? So I'm on the Cadillac, I'm on the push-through bar on the tower, and I do swan there. I take out the strap, I hook the strap around your legs, and now I don't have something to push against, but I have something that I'm pressing, that's pressing down on the back of my leg so I can come up higher. Now I can control the bar and come up. So all these pieces layer in, but that's all very classically based. So how do I bring that forward? Where else do I see extension in the world? Where else do I see extension? I go all the way back into my cat-cow, which is a pre-Pilates move. Cat-cow, bring them all the way back, quadruped position, quadruped, cow, cat. Can they do that? Can they do that movement of that spine in that articulation? And how do I teach cat-cow? Because if I can't teach cat-cow in a regard of where the spine is going, articulation and where it's going, then how am I going to teach swan? Right? Am I making any sense? I have no idea. Okay. So let's break cat-cow down. And at this point, you're thinking, what in the world is this woman talking about? She doesn't really know, because at this point, this is only the third podcast. So you probably won't even listen to this one because it's only the third. Let's hope. Maybe I won't even post this one. Who knows? Oh, they're all going out. They're all going out. Okay. Because they're only going to get better, right? I'm learning as I go along. This shows, right? I'm learning something new, and I'm only hopefully going to get better. I've been teaching for 34 years. 34 years. I have been teaching in some sense of form. I've been teaching. But when I go to the podcast, I'm learning. I'm learning how to do this, and I want to talk to you because I'm used to talking to people, and I'm used to talking things out. So I am hoping and praying that this gets more comfortable for me, and that my podcasts get a little bit more fluid in their presentation, just like my classes are. They hopefully, most of them flow relatively well, hopefully. But just like in my on-demand studio, there was definitely learning happening in the beginning of when I was teaching on demand. I find that I'm a little bit more comfortable now teaching in that format. I can walk in my studio, close the door, turn on record, and start going. Now, I do, if nobody's on live with me, I'll go back and I'll stop and I'll restart and I'll stop and I'll restart. I've started this one a couple of times, but at this point we're in it. We're 20 minutes in. We're just going to keep going. So hopefully, as I progress and get more comfortable in this conversation, hopefully you'll stay around with me and you'll listen to me as I get better too, and we're all learning together. Okay, so let's go back into it. So cat-cow, if I'm teaching cat-cow, I'm on all fours. Have somebody wrist sensitive, go for it, go into that forearm. But I'm teaching cat-cow. How do I teach the extension of the spine without talking in the quote unquote negative? How do I talk into that cat-cow where I'm saying, don't drop into your belly, right? Because a lot of times we're trying to teach in the positive, as in we're trying to teach into the what we want to have happen versus what we don't want to have happen. Now you may converse into it a little bit here and there, but the goal is that our conversation becomes more in the let's take you here versus let's not take you here, okay? So I'm on all fours, we're on all fours, we're in it. And a lot of times when I start doing this in my podcast, just FYI, if you're listening, great, you're not gonna notice this, but if you're watching me, you're gonna notice I tend to close my eyes because at that point then I'm gonna take myself actually into my class and I'm teaching you as I would be teaching a class. It allows me to kind of flow into it. Okay. So I put my hands underneath my shoulders, my knees underneath my hips. I'm gonna find all fours position. Wrist sensitive, forearms, fantastic. What you're gonna find though is that you feel a bit like you're nose diving down to the floor. It's okay. However, that's what you're going to feel. You're gonna feel a bit like you're nose diving. Okay. So on all fours, and I'm gonna take the pelvic tilt. And if I'm just going straight into cat, right? So I'm not thinking lateral flexion. So I'm just going right into cat. I'm gonna hold my neutral or hold where I'm right at on the floor. Inhale, exhale. I'm gonna round out, exhale, push the floor away with my feet, with my hands. I'm gonna push the floor away with my knees and my shins. I'm gonna push the floor away from the tailbone, rounding as best as I can all the way up and around that spine, letting the head and the crown of the head look for the floor. I'm gonna relax my shoulders so that I'm trying to keep my shoulders from finding my ears, keep a long neck. Inhale, and as I inhale, I'm gonna try to take it from the tailbone. And from that tailbone, I'm gonna have a slight reach through the lumbar into the middle back as I take through the crown of the head. And at the crown of the head, my shoulders drop down. My extension comes from the center of my back versus the middle of my low back, right? So I inhale, exhale, I take it back again. I tuck through the tail and I really expand and I try to spread the back apart, almost like I'm stretching the springs on the reformer. And I'm doing it the same way when I close. So when I come back in through cow, I'm thinking that I'm drawing that spring back together. So I need to control the spring coming in rather than letting the back just compress on itself, right? So I control the reach of the extension, control the reach of the tailbone, try to still stay connected in the front of the powerhouse, so where the belly is. I'm staying connected there where the water's going underneath, like I'm bridging up and over a water source. And as I come through, I'm trying to keep my belly from necessarily touching down in that water. Exhale, round back out into it. Come through that. Now that water has shot up right into the belly, and I'm going to try to keep my belly from getting wet as I exhale and spread the spine apart, one vertebrae at a time. Inhale, exhale, we draw it back through, lengthen through the crown of the head, through the tailbone, and I'm lengthening out and away. So I'm going to find each wall that I'm spreading through rather than the belly dropping down and the head pulling to the ceiling. You are in that extension, but at the same time, it's a pull rather than a lift up to the ceiling, rather than that smile, making that smile as big, make that smile long versus short and round. Make the smile long and up at the end to dot into the dimples. So those are all little pieces. Hopefully that helps you in that cat-cow extension. But in that cat-cow extension, that's where I have the learning curve so that when I do swan, I'm teaching that extension with lengthen happening at the same time. Does that make sense? So I'm lengthening at the same time extending. That keeps us from becoming those little turtles of our necks. So when I was over at my friend's house this morning, we were talking about in your swan extension, the goal is we're trying to avoid being the little turtle that comes out of his shell to peek around and check out what's happening, right? Up and looking, right? So that's where all those wrinkles come from. We are ingrained with a bit of safety in our world that if I'm going to take a peek to see if some kind of, dangers on the outside, I'm going to look up. But as soon as I look up, I've got those lovely little wrinkles on my neck, and I'm pinching right in here. Right there, right? So what I want to do is I want to lengthen through the crown of the head. So I want to come out, and I want to slightly come out and just graze the surface of the floor, and then maybe take a peek. If I feel as though I can look up to the top of and see my eyebrow, then more than likely I've taken my head too high. So I want to keep my gaze on that horizon rather than up at my eyebrow. Does that make sense? But again, it comes from teaching cat-cow. And if I'm in cow and I'm trying, your eyes follow your head. So if the top of my head is coming up, my eyes are going to follow it. My head's going to follow where my eyes go, right? It's hard to look up without your head coming up. So try to keep the two in line. Where my head goes, where my eyes go, that's where my gaze goes. That's where my neck goes. Okay, so this was quite the journey between coming all the way from how I just named my lovely little podcast all the way to how to teach that cat-cow and how important it is to learn to teach cat-cow so that we can teach them swan, and how we can teach them swan through the different exercise or the different pieces of apparatus, and why classical matters, but then also why contemporary also matters, because if I'm going to teach this, how does that relate over here to a contemporary type of move? How do I move in my world, right? Yeah. So pre-Pilates moves, there's your question. Are pre-Pilates moves, are they classical or are they contemporary? Oh, it's gonna, if you're a classical instructor, or if you're somebody who has been around the block in the Pilates world, you're gonna have a lot to say if you actually listen to this whole thing. And trust me, all I want is dialogue. I just want conversation because I think it's good. I don't think we need to live in only one camp. I think classical has its absolute place in the world as far as Pilates goes, because it is, I mean, you're taking what Joe created and you're staying within Joe's realm. And that's where a lot of magic can happen. Absolutely. And my mentor absolutely was able to take somebody, she was talking about how somebody with scoliosis, and she was able to see the degrees of scoliosis change with classical, only classical. Stay in that classical. It's fantastic. However, I see Pilates principles in play outside of those classical exercises. I see Pilates principles everywhere. I talked about it in my last little hoorah as I was walking around. I videoed myself talking while I was taking the dogs for a spin, and I talked about, and I'll have that one up, that'll be before this one, and I talked about how even on a walk, you can see those Pilates principles play out. So I see Pilates principles everywhere. And I think we need to explore them and find them and see them. And I think it'll help Pilates in the long run, because you're going to see people who are weightlifters and they're going to become Pilates instructors because they're going to see the benefits of how Pilates has helped them in their weightlifting journey. And I think that's important. There you go. That's me. Okay. So if you want to work with me or follow me, just keep follow and subscribe. Follow and subscribe. Follow and subscribe. Thanks for coming in. And if you enjoyed the rambling, great. If you want to leave me a note, I'm going to be super careful here because I want the conversations to continue as far as within this world of Pilates. And I'm not saying that I am the absolute essence of only knowing the absolute way of doing things. There are classically trained instructors, and there are people who have been teaching Pilates a whole lot longer than I have. And they can absolutely weigh in here, and I may have made some of them mad, and I have maybe made a few people go, yeah, let's go, let's talk, right? I don't want to make anybody mad, and I will turn off conversations if they're super not nice. Okay, so I want this to be a complete open forum of dialogue where people feel like they can converse about movement and have a scientific conversation about movement. Okay, go. Okay. Morning hair, all that jazz, morning everything. Thanks for coming in. Leave me a comment, leave me a note, like and subscribe. Thanks for coming in. Have a phenomenal rest of your day. Remember, as Mr. Joe Pilates has said, movement heals and change happens through movement. All right, I hope I looked at whatever camera I needed to be looking at here because, like I said, this is only my third one out the chute. And we'll find out. Okay. Bye, y'all. Have a good one. Add that sauce. You never know where it'll take you.